right, you guys ready for me to talk about what kind of government we have? I'm thinking about it, and I figured it out, and it's really bad. Okay. See, I had so much trouble figuring it out because I couldn't understand how the government could be so weak. Xcom is a government agency. How can corporations decide we're not going to serve you anymore? How could the government be so weak as to allow one of its own branches to be unable to use the roads? Well, upon reflection, I realized that the government is not weak in this world. The government is extremely powerful and authoritarian. Because I was thinking too small. The government is bigger. Much, much bigger. I was actually contemplating whether or not I should make this a standalone essay, just as its own video, because holy shit. Okay. Alright. I have to point to a few things in here. First, we have to just establish a couple of really quickly baseline things before we get into what was in front of me the whole time. So we're not in... where should I even begin? We knew we were in a dystopia the moment we read this little entry over here. We knew we were in a dystopia, but my God, it gets worse and worse as we contemplate it. So, I think, let me see, somewhere in here, okay. In front of you is one of the pieces. They're scattered throughout the UFOpedia in weird places. For a while I thought a bunch of things were contradictory, possibly even deliberately contradictory, but no, it all does fit together into a terrifying whole. So, really briefly, we need to start with capitalism and the opposite of capitalism, which, you may have heard different definitions of what capitalism is, but so the thing about the word capitalism is it wasn't coined by the so-called capitalists. You can read through all of The Wealth of Nations, and Adam Smith never mentions the word once, because it wasn't a word. He was arguing against mercantilism. He was arguing how slavery was bad for the wealth of nations and should be abolished. He was arguing all kinds of things that are considered to be the ground floor of capitalism. Adam Smith is generally credited. I mean, you know. Anyway. So, what is capitalism at its core? The conceit of capitalism is you own yourself and you own your own labor. If you make an object, you can sell it and keep whatever the profit is. You can then take that money and offer to pay somebody else to sell you their labor. Pure capitalism, laissez-faire capitalism, or free market capitalism has no regulations or rules on it. It would be, and it's only theoretical because I don't think it's ever existed. It's a utopian, idealistic thing where the invisible hand of the market will take care of everything and you don't need any government regulations. So if somebody starts deciding to put arsenic in baby food, you would have no mechanism to stop them. The market would have to decide. As you might be able to tell from the example I gave, I'm not in this camp. What is the opposite of capitalism? It is not communism. It is actually command economy, which kind of coincides a lot of times with communism. They attempt to go more that way. But basically, the closest you've ever come to a command economy historically would be serfdom. You do not own the rights to your labor. You do not own the rights to yourself. you can't leave this plot of land. You will work here, and you will work 8 hours a day. You can't travel anywhere, and you will give what you got to the Lord, and the Lord will give you whatever he feels like. This is that's anti-capitalism. That's theoretically, it can go further if someday we have an AI that can decide and builds, again, a utopian ideal where it manages everything and there's no wasted resources and nothing extra is produced unnecessarily. Okay, now that we've got this two of them, it is a scale. All societies exist somewhere between these two extremes. No society has ever reached either extreme of a true command economy or a true free market laissez-faire capitalism. It has never happened. It probably never will, barring extreme data collection and AI-driven, So, and every decision that you make within your society pushes you one way or the other. You abolish slavery. That pushes you more towards capitalism. You decide you need a Food and Drug Administration. That pushes you more towards regulation and command economy. It's in that direction, right? So you can think of it as chaos versus order if you must. What is this society, though? This society is not endgame capitalism. No. Far, far from it. So to start with, our government here is regulating the style of vehicles. You can't even build and sell a car without building it aesthetically the way the government tells you to. But it goes further. All over the place, we see that the regulations are actually intense and harsh. What's another good example? And I'm kind of going off the cuff here, but I think Evonet. Sophisticated plants purify water according to the high standards required by the Senate. It's peppered throughout here, all of the regulations and shit going on. Okay, how did we get here and what is this? Because we do have a word for this form of government when we get to it. Well, corporations hate capitalism. Oh, they like capitalism for themselves, but they hate competition. They don't want anybody else to have any. So the natural thing that corporations want to do is to push things more towards a command economy and more towards state control. I'll give an example. I'll make a really simple example. You own a chicken packing plant, a corporation that packs chicken. You are the most profitable chicken packing plant in the world. You control 30% of the global market. And yeah, you have a few competitors who are, and then you've got a whole bunch of little privately owned chicken packing plants and stuff that are struggling because, they're struggling to compete with you. You push the prices down so much. So what do you want to do as somebody who's a massive, most profitable chicken packing plant? What do you lobby for from a government? Do you lobby to remove the minimum wage so that you can pay your workers less? Why would you want to do that? Oh, you think that's going to give you a higher profit margin? Yeah, sure, but that's not what you want. You're already the most profitable. There's a much better thing you can advocate for. Lobby to make the minimum wage go up. Because as the most profitable plant, you can afford to pay your workers more. But your competition, the ones that are struggling, they cannot afford that. And they're going to start going out of business. While you're at it, why don't we see if we can get a regulation, an environmental regulation about meat packing? Now you have to use now you have to get more machinery, more stuff to clean the water after it comes out. Yeah, that sounds good. Your competition can't afford the new machinery to fit the new regulations. Now let's see if we can regulate that chicken nuggets can only be in certain shapes, specific shapes. Like anything you can. You'll be a little bit less profitable, but instead of 30% of the market, you'll control 40%, 50%, 60%. You don't want competition. You don't want a free market. Free markets are bad when you're the corporation. We have reached the point where the corporations are so big, they individually control everything. Everything is controlled by these corporations. Every product has only a single supplier left. No one can compete. And it's what's even weirder. Xcom is just another corporation. Yes, you are a branch of the government, but so are the police. So is everyone else. What's the difference? Megapol sells weapons and armor. We manufacture weapons and armor and we put them on the market. We're about to start selling vehicles. We are a government agency, but we're effectively identical to the corporations, and the corporations are effectively identical to government agencies like Xcom. And because Transstellar is essentially indistinguishable from a government agency, when they're blocking us from using the roads, that's the government blocking us from using their roads. But it gets worse. Oh, yeah, no, we're not there yet. There's more about how bad this society is. And we're coming to the word that describes what this government form is. There are a few outsiders. Things that are not that aren't part of it yet. We have the criminal gangs. We have the Sentient Engine Liberation Front and the Mutant Alliance. These poor guys aren't even allowed to own themselves. They're not even allowed to own their own labor, as previously described, because just discrimination against androids. Yeah. Anyway. But there's a particular outsider that I want to focus on. And also, these guys want to become just like everybody else. They want to become big corporations that are part of the government, part of the system. The government and the corporations have become one and the same entity. And they don't want to tear the system down. They want to become part of it. But the worst... You know that these guys are completely outside the system? These guys don't have any friends. These guys you can attack with impunity. And from the very moment the game begins, you are essentially encouraged to kick in their doors and start shooting them. In fact, the game would be a lot harder if you didn't just start seizing their assets. So, the player is encouraged to, as part of the government, oppress a religious minority and start murdering them and seizing their assets. So what is the word for this type of government? I've not been looking at chat because I've been monologuing. I'll look at chat in a second. Some of you may have already named it or guessed. Well, see, I have a historical quote for you. I hope I quote it exactly correctly, but you can look it up if I'm off. This famous Italian dictator, Mussolini, you know, that ally of Hitler, he said his quite good credentials on being a fascist and knowing what fascism is. He said fascism is the lucrative merger of corporation and the state. So this is not a fascist dictatorship. This is a fascist republic. That is our starting point. So after we have concluded our apocalypse and genocide of the aliens in their dimension, does it get better? Xcom will be in a position technologically where they could topple this system if they, or make any changes they want. Potentially. I don't know. I don't know how this ends. But holy fuck.